I want you to go back, and I want you to think of your favorite Christmas present that you've ever had. I want you to go back and think of your favorite Christmas present that you've ever given to somebody else. So I had a funny story. Back when I was in college, right, I go down there, and I'm a country boy from Tuscarawas County, Ohio, and I'm going to college in Cincinnati. And in our dorm in Cincinnati, keep in mind, this is before Wi-Fi. This is before flat-screen televisions. This is before everything fun video game system. They just invented the PlayStation when I was in college. And I remember the first time somebody came to our college with a PlayStation, and it was like, oh my goodness, what is this madness? Oh, the graphics are so awesome, and this is so great. So in college back then, I had a television set. And the television I took with me to college was the same thing that I had from when I was young, was just an extra at the house. And it was one of those TVs that didn't have a remote, okay? And not only did it not have a remote, but you turned it by the dial. Y'all ever have a dial TV? How many people have had a dial TV before? See, we can be friends. So it was a dial TV, and you had to turn it on, you had to pull the knob, right? And then you had to turn the dial, but if you pull too hard, the knob's going to come off, so you got to be real careful with that and how to kind of thread that needle. So it was just a great TV, and I loved it, but the color started going out. Now, I had found a Nintendo or a Super Nintendo that I had there, and a Sega Genesis, and that was like the college student, I'm going to kill time with thing, right? And I noticed that the color was going out on the TV, so I wanted a new TV. So I go back, and I'm looking, and at this point, I think it was my sophomore year of college. So I'd have been about probably 19, 20 at that Christmas, and I asked Mom and Dad, I said, listen, I found a TV. Kmart is selling this TV, and they got it on sale for Black Friday for like $99. Now listen, Mom, you wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, right? You go to Kmart at like 3 o'clock in the morning, you could stand in line for like 3 or 4 hours until they open at 6. You can get this TV for $99. Now, it was a 19-inch tube TV. It was color, and I wanted it because it had a remote control. And getting a remote control TV was great. So I knew, because I was home for Thanksgiving, I knew they got up because I heard them. May or may not have set my alarm for that time. And I knew Mom and Dad got up, and they wanted to go Black Friday shopping. They didn't like Black Friday, but they did it anyway. So they go, and I'm all excited, and I know when they come back separate. So I know Dad was hiding something. And I knew he had a TV, but I didn't see a TV that day. So I keep looking, and I keep thinking that I'm going to be lucky with this, and I'm waiting for this TV. So the first time they leave the house, and it's just me, I do what I love to do, and I snoop for presents. Because every year, the annual Christmas tradition is to snoop for presents, right? Because that's just what you do. So I start snooping, and I'm looking, and I'm digging, and I find it. Tucked away in a closet, buried under a pile of blankets, I find this TV. And it was in a box, this big square box. And I'm super excited, so I find all the stuff. I repack it in the blanket, and I leave it alone in the closet. Christmas rolls around. So I'm back home. College is done that semester, and Christmas morning rolls out. And they bring out, present number one. In our house, we have a tradition. We get presents from Santa, even though I'm now 38, almost 39 years old. We get presents from the pets. So I got a present from Poochie, and I got a present from our cat, and I got a present from all that, and I get presents from Mom and Dad. They one by one give me all these presents, and my mom just has this smirk because what I'm seeing around the tree is that there's no large box wrapped up. So I'm starting to wonder, what's going on, right? Now, my birthday is a week after Christmas. Y'all ever got a December birthday? How many December birthdays do we have here? Do you guys ever get lumped into Christmas where you just get the same birthday and Christmas present all the time? It's like, here's your birthday present. It's something wintry, okay? So I have a January birthday. My birthday is just right after Christmas, but it's like the second day of January. So my stuff always gets lumped in with Christmas too. So I'm thinking, all right, you're pulling a trick with me. You're going to do something here. I open up all the Christmas presents, and my mom, knowing that I had snooped, knowing what I knew, she says, Trevor, do you like your Christmas presents? Yes, Mom. I like my Christmas presents very much. What's your favorite one? So I had to pick one and tell her, and so I think I said, yeah, the pack of underwear for there was just great, man. That was wonderful, Mom. Thank you. Super embarrassing, by the way. That was great. Did you get everything you were hoping for, Trevor? Yes, Mom, I got everything I was hoping for. Okay. She lets a whole entire week pass for my birthday. And she's just got this arrogant, I just taught you a life lesson thing, right? So my birthday rolls around. And so she brings out a couple gifts, a couple real small things. And every year, Mom, I think she forgets she does it, but she does it every year. She gets me a wallet with like a gift card or something in it. And so I open it, and she's like, did you get everything you wanted for your birthday this year? I'm literally leaving for college the next day. Yes, Mom, I got everything I wanted. And she's like, good. My dad just rolls his eyes, and he's like, Judy, I'm done. And he gets up, he walks back out, and he brings out this TV. I'm elated. Everybody wins. Mom looks at me, and she says, listen, I was not going to give you that TV for Christmas, and I didn't want to give it to you for your birthday. I was going to put it in your car right before you left. And she says, listen, your mind and your heart were out of focus for Christmas this year, and I didn't like what I saw. Because I was looking here. And my focus should have been here. So in our holiday survival guide, the first thing we're going to talk about today is materialism, consumerism, stuff, priorities, and the good old-fashioned 10 Commandments. So look with me at Exodus chapter 20. Now, you have to love and to appreciate the 10 Commandments. And when you have the 10 Commandments, I want you to understand something, that this is the beginning not only of the 10 Commandments, but of Mosaic law. So, for instance, when we think of the law, we actually just confine ourselves to the 10 Commandments because they're very easy to remember. They're very easy to organize. They're very easy to build a pattern of behavior around. The issue with that is that the Old Testament law, Mosaic law, is actually far greater and far bigger than just the 10 Commandments. There's something more to this here than just the 10 Commandments. And so we assume that the 10 Commandments are everything, but when really they're not. The law itself is so much bigger and broader, but the 10 Commandments stand out, and they stand out very well. So with the 10 Commandments, you have a very distinct and unique order that happens. Now this is in Exodus 20, and we're only going to read the first 6 verses, so we're not going to cover all 10 of the commandments, but we want to touch on the first 2 of them. And it'll be in Exodus 20, verse 1 through 6. And God spoke all of these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. All right, when we see the word gods here, and he says, you shall have no other gods, here's what he's talking about. This is the word Elohim. Now, we know in the Old Testament there's a lot of different words and root words and subwords that are used for the name of God as we discuss who God is. This one being a very generic word, Elohim. Essentially, there is to be no other thing leading your life, no other divinity, nothing else that is here. So he says that because God himself says that he is a jealous God. Okay, so keep that in mind. When he says, you shall have no other gods before me, then look down here at verse 4. You shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven, above or on the earth, beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for sin. Now the Father is to the 3rd and 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here, and some of the things I want to do is just walk you through some of just the verbiage that's used here. So whenever he says that you shall not make, okay, let's stop. The word make here in Hebrew is called asah, and it's basically our word carve. So this is something that has essentially been engineered. So I want you to think for a moment of somebody who says, I am a creator of something. I am a creator of, hey, here's a project that I want to make. Okay, so somebody last week made our new sound contraption here, and they fashioned together. We've had a lot of sound issues that are now fixed, and so they fashioned together a shelving unit. For Christmas, there might be some of you who says, I'm going to fashion together and make something handmade for a family member this year for Christmas. I want to put together and build something with my hands. Now, what goes into that is a lot of premeditation. Right? So if I have a statue that I want to make, say it's an ice statue with a chainsaw, because that sounds like a really fun habit, right, or hobby. So let's say I want to make a carving, I want to make a drawing, I want to write a document, I want to build something with my hands. You have to have an idea. You don't just go into it and wing it and create something incredibly beautiful. You have to have a pattern or a forethought. So what's going on here is just this. It's the idea of carving. You shall not make. So here's what happens. It's the idea of, I don't like what I presently have, so I'm going to create by thinking and premeditation of something that I would rather have and serve. So I don't like what I have to abhor to, and that is the teachings of God. And this guy who pulled me out of Egypt, and my life is now difficult, my commerce is difficult, everything about my livelihood right now is challenged. So I don't like him, but I'm going to create this thing with my own hands. In a minute, we're going to turn to Exodus 32, because they break these commandments. And this is kind of what they do. Is so God's saying, don't carve something out. Don't create something that's just obscene and that's just unlike the person of God. So you shall not make a graven image. So if we come down here and we look at verse 5, here's what we see. Shall not make an image, this is verse 4, of an idol in the form of anything. Verse 5 says, you shall not bow down to them. This is the Hebrew word shakah. And it means to lie prostrate before somebody. Lie prostrate before something that is there and something that is looking at you. And I am paying homage. I am acknowledging that this thing I am bowing down to is greater than me, and it is worth my attention. So here's the thing. We have today a divinity problem. We have a divinity problem. There is a new software. How many of y'all are iPhone lovers? Y'all iPhone lovers? How many of you have an iPhone? Okay, how many of you come from the unholy tribe of all things Android? Okay. The First Church Presbyterian. I'm just joking. They would love to have it. I'm joking. I kid. So iPhone software has come out with this new feature, and I absolutely hate it. I hate it. It actually gave me a notification this morning when I was greeting people. So it's called Screen Time. And basically what it does is it now pops up and it says, this is how you've been using your phone. And it gives you a breakdown of the types of apps you've been using by hours and percentages of your day. So today it tells me, it says, Trevor, you're, for the last week, your screen time has been down by 12%. And I think that I'm like, great, and like, this is good. I feel pretty good, right? I've used my phone 12% less than I do every other time. And it says, your average time is blank amount of hours a day. I'm not telling you. And it says, your average time is blank amount of hours a day. Don't worry, it was a single-digit number, so that at least was thankful. And I stopped to think to myself, I'm staring for 6 hours out of my day. And what's great, I use my phone for a lot of my reading to get ready for stuff here. But let's face it, okay? I've been following Buckeyes updates a lot. I've been checking on online banking a lot. I've been trying to get sermon ideas and stuff here. I've been looking up Christmas stuff. Research, just figuring life out. Instagram, Facebook. What did Shannon just say? What happened at my house? The kids did what? I'm coming home right now. I'm sorry. Stuff like that, right? And it's all compact into the hand. But when I'm trying to face this, it's basically revealing to you what your priority is. And here's the deal. When the 10 Commandments start, and when he says, you shall have no other gods before me, like, he's talking on a divine level, and he's talking about other things of religious nature. So for them, they've just come out of Egypt. There's pagan deities there. They're trying to go into the promised land, which is Canaan. There's pagan deities. But I have to ask you today, what have we put as a priority above the person of God? Because these people had to be reminded that this is a commandment because they are allowing something to take precedent above the person of God. So he goes on and he says, you shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything. And there's more. So when he calls this idol, it's what's called pesah or pesel. And it's just that idea of a carved image, but it's something that is temporary. And it's something that is fake. And it's something that can't give you hope. So here's the question I want to ask you. Where is the source of your joy? there's a variety of addictions in the world, and there's basically an encyclopedia that gathers up together all the information that we can use to say, hey, you have this addiction, you have that addiction. One of the things that we're beginning to see is that shopping and online shopping, the idea of spending money for something else, is becoming an addiction. And here's why it's becoming an addiction, because there's a huge rush on the process to acquire something and the act of acquiring something. So it goes back to think of it. Let's say it's the TV at Black Friday. How many of y'all went Black Friday shopping here? Y'all are brave souls. Listen, y'all are brave souls. Let's say it's Black Friday. Let's say it's just the regular act of going out and going Christmas shopping. Here's one of the things that we see. We take effort to go out, to pursue, to engage, and to acknowledge. I want to give somebody a gift. Why do I want to give them a gift? I want to give them a gift because I want to be the cool guy or the cool gal or whoever's giving a gift. Are we evangelizing with the same effort to that of which we use for Christmas shopping? Are we praying to the same effort that we put into a Christmas list for friends and family? Are we expressing gratitude to Christ for his sacrifice on the cross to the same volume of when we say thanks to someone for buying us that cool gift? Are we replacing God with stuff? The foundation of Christianity is essentially the concept of removing an inanimate object so that the divine can do something special. For instance, at the very resurrection of Christ, as you have Jesus who was just raised from the dead, and he moves the inanimate object out of the way as if it's nothing. Because for God, the object, the carved image, the stone, the idol for the Old Testament people, well, whichever it is, I'm removing the inanimate out of the way to make way for the person of God in my life. So the question is, are we replacing God? Turn with me to Exodus chapter 32. And while you're there, and we're thinking it, because that's a long passage, I want you to kind of be ready for it. So we get the holiday of Christmas today, and we have to go back and ask ourselves, when did we begin celebrating Christmas? Like what was the day that we thought, hey, you know what, let's celebrate Christmas? Well, the word Christmas is basically just the Christ Mass. It is a service that the church does to celebrate Christmas. Now, it started in the 4th century A.D. that we started celebrating Christmas, and it was when Christianity was legalized by Roman Emperor Constantine. It was in 336 is the first known date that we celebrated Christmas on December 25th. So as we begin to go through that and process all of the stuff that's there, here's what the thinking was. They wanted to celebrate Jesus. They wanted to have something to do. And so what they decided was we would celebrate Christmas at night. It was the only time the church would allow a nighttime service. Again, remember, the days before electric, the days before indoor heat, this was tough stuff. So Constantine says, hey, church, go do your thing. Let's call it Christmas. And let's do it on December 25th and celebrate it right around midnight so we can have this great celebration after the sun sets and before the sun rises, and that's when they begin to celebrate it. But here's the real thinking of it. Christmas is a collision of the Ten Commandments in culture. Here's why. So back in the time, you have multiple things colliding together for Christianity, and one of them is Christianity started in Jerusalem, which was under the Roman Empire at the time. So as Christianity begins to develop and to broaden out and to widen its horizons, one of the things that it endures is, in fact, the Roman culture itself, not the Catholic Church. It became the Catholic Church, but what it was is it was handling Roman culture. So you've heard of these things called the 12 days of Christmas, right? In place already is Hanukkah, who celebrates multiple days of Christmas. So the Jews have their holiday at this time of the year. The church sees this, and they want something to counter that. So they see the Romans, where they live. And for several centuries now, they have a holiday called Saturnalia. And so they're seeing it celebrated multiple times through the year. In fact, Rome had a holiday on December 25th, and it was a holiday that was pledging allegiance to the unconquered sun. So Constantine, the emperor, says, hey, take that date. Your foundation is that Jesus is unconquered, so celebrate that date. Replace that which was pagan, which that which is holy. It's all this don't let any other gods come before your God thing. So Christianity says, okay, we're going to replace all these pagan things with our own tradition, with our own teaching. And so it's the same thing up north. So as the church begins to spread, it goes up through Eastern Europe, it goes up through Northern Europe, and as it goes into the Scandinavian areas where it's very bitterly cold and they're facing winter solstice, they have their stuff called the Yule log and a tradition that goes around that. So the Christian church says, listen, no other gods. We're not going to let this stand between me and a relationship with Christ. I'm going to replace that. I'm going to substitute that out. I'm going to take away those temptations of the world, and I'm going to set them aside, and I'm going to come in here and do my Christian thing. Christmas traditions, as we know it, has its roots there, and it just blossoms. And then Pilgrims set sail to America, X, Y, and Z. We have the traditions that we have in place today for many reasons. The problem is, we don't have a Christmas problem. We have a materialism problem. And that materialism problem manifests itself now, but this is a 365-day-a-year issue. And the ultimate question comes down to, what have we allowed to stand in our way and break Commandment 1? So if we're surviving the holidays, and we're getting through Christmas, and we're getting over all things New Year, and preparing for the new awakening, new beginning that we have in life, what are the priorities of our life? What is the priority? Because I promise you, when family issues arise, when we come into this time of the year and we battle depression, because Christmas is a marker every year of where my life was last year and where my life was the year before that. And things happen in life, and changes occur, and changes arise. And we face ourselves with the problem of judging where I am in life off of the Christmas, December litmus test, and it brings in depression. When I'm sad, and I'm broken, and I'm torn, and I'm beaten, I cannot turn to a television for help. I cannot turn to a diamond necklace for help. I cannot turn to a shirt or a coupon for help. I cannot turn to a tree, to a house, to a pretty little red car with a bow on it. I can turn to a place where my faith is authenticated and genuine and permanent, and that is to the person of Jesus Christ, who holds the number one spot in our life. That is where we turn, and that is where we go. We face those traditions, we face those issues, but whenever the rubber meets the road, we can't turn there for hope. My hope is not in the foundation of stuff. My hope is in the presence of the living God. So you say, Trevor, that works out fine, but listen, my story is really tough. My story is dark, and I tried to trust God, and I tried to trust Jesus. I tried to do this church thing, and I'm just going to level with you. It didn't work for me. You know what? It's okay to think that way. It really is. I've had those own moments in my life. This time last year, we were in Ukraine. I got a call. My grandma passed away. I'm on the other side of the world. I cannot get to a woman who I dearly loved. Hated that. I'm the pastor in the family. I was there for everybody else's death except for hers. I prayed and prayed and prayed while we were stuck in an apartment in Ukraine. I just kept praying, God, get me home in time so I can see her one more time. And you know what? He didn't let me. You think I had bitterness this time last year? You would definitely be correct. I didn't. I get it. But we still have to trust him anyway. And we still have to trust his plan. Because, see, it's in those moments of darkness when we don't get our way from God that we begin to do other stuff. And we begin to substitute God. And what we have to understand is this. God is not Santa Claus or a genie in the bottle where I go to him with a wish list, and if I don't get my wish list, I'm mad at him. That's not how God works. We default to his presence and his sovereignty and his stuff. God knew last year I didn't need to be with Grandma because we did have a good final moment. It was just before I left. But I needed to be with 3 kiddos in Ukraine who were ready for new life. And he knew that. And I had to accept that. I had to accept his plan. He did not need to accept mine. So here's the problem. In Exodus 32, they've heard the 10 Commandments. Moses is up, and he's with God. He's on Mount Sinai, but he's taking a long time. And God is delivering to Moses the law. And he's given Moses all this rich stuff. Moses is basking in the very presence of God. And he takes the commandments, and Joshua is with him. And he turns around and he comes back, but he's been gone for a while. And people are already grumpy with God because they've not been getting their way. They wanted something. They wanted freed from Egypt. And when they were freed from Egypt, they got what they want, but it wasn't in the way that they wanted it. And they doubted the very sovereignty of God. They were frustrated with God's plan. So now Moses is gone. Things are not going their way. So what they decide to do is the first moment things don't go their way, what do? They take away God's sovereignty and his plan from him, and they put it to work in their own lives. And while Moses and Joshua are up on a hill, and they're before the face of the Lord, Aaron and the people are breaking command 1. They've made an idol. They've made a golden calf, which is a whole other discussion on the Apis bowl of Egypt. But they've replaced God with their own predetermined agenda. Because they didn't like that Moses was taking so long. They didn't like how rough it was when they left Egypt. And it was comfortable for me when I was in my misery. And now that God has stepped in and delivered me, I don't like how God has stepped in and delivered me because he's not delivered me in a comfortable way. There's a gentleman I knew one time, and I've shared stories of my time preaching at a little campground when I was young. There's a gentleman there, and he owned a hamburger joint down in Louisiana, and he would come up to Ohio every year to camp, which is weird. If you live in Louisiana, I am sure there's plenty of cool nature down there, but he came up here anyway. And he said, this is pre-Katrina, but he said, we had a natural disaster down there one time, and our community was leveled. And he said, I went in there and I set up a cheeseburger shop. And he said, it was like a food on a truck type thing. And he said, I go in there and I set everything up, and these people have nothing. Their homes and about 3 neighborhood radius were destroyed, and they needed something. And he said, I was really, really, really hoping that I could bring hope to them and feed them, and I committed to feeding them for free for a long time. And he said, for me on my end to mobilize everything, he said, it's a huge cost to me, but he said, there's only so much I can gather in the time that I have. And he said, I had beef, and I had the buns and everything there. He said we could do French fries and some other stuff. But he said I was out of soft drinks because we didn't have the cartons in time. And he said I was lacking condiments. So at some point, we were unable to have ketchup, mustard, and then we ran out of cheese. But I still had the burgers. And he said, sure enough, he said the people who needed the most help were all fine with it and appreciative. But the people who their houses really weren't wrecked that bad, but they were just really uncomfortable from the situation because roads were cut off and everything else was happening, they began to complain to me. He said, I've literally spent just thousands and thousands of dollars trying to help these people, and in their greatest time of need, my help wasn't good enough because I didn't have cheese for their burger, and I'm getting screamed at. And he said, I couldn't understand it. Now, what you and I know is there was frustration, and they're taking their frustration out in a situation, so I get that. But this is what's going on in Exodus, is God has taken them out, and they just don't like God's plan because they weren't comfortable enough. They were consumed by materialism. They were consumed by consumerism. They were consumed by all things stuff and comfort, and they let their relationship with God be compromised by their personal comfort. Their agenda, their will, and their comfort zone bubble had taken the place of a genuine presence of God in their life. So the passage reads this, and it's disturbing. We'll just start at verse 1. When the people saw that Moses was gone so long and coming down from the mountain, they gathered around Aaron and said, "Come, make us gods who will go before us. As for this fellow Moses, who brought us out of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." So they do know what's happened to him. Moses is not terribly far away. They know that the wonder of God is working here. They're just being stubborn because they're refusing to see what God is clearly doing. And this is what consumerism does. This is when I let my will get in the way of what God is doing, I become blind to myself, and I can't see what God is doing right in front of my face. They are not terribly far from the proximity of God, and they knew this was going to be a holy spiritual experience. They just couldn't hang. Aaron answered them, "Take off the gold earrings that your wives, your sons, and your daughters are wearing, and bring them to me." So all the people took off their earrings and brought them to Aaron. He took what they handed him and made it into an idol, that pesel, that idol, that carving, in the shape of a calf, fashioning it with a tool. There is just profound premeditation because they already know God's here, but I want my thing. And he says, these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of the calf and announced, tomorrow there will be a festival to the Lord. So the next day the people rose early and sacrificed burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. Afterward they got down to eat and drink and got up to indulge in revelry. The will of God is saying, do this. And they're saying, but I don't like your will. You're taking too long. And you're not doing it my way, God. So I'm going to do this. Then the Lord said to Moses, go down. Your people. Now, what you see there, when he says your people, God isn't saying my people. Because earlier when God first talked to Moses at the burning bush, it's all about, I have heard my people's cry. And right here, your people. God's done. Why? Because they've distanced themselves from God. They refused to listen, and so they took matters in their own hands. And he says, listen, I am separating from you. I might exist everywhere spatially, but relationally, we're done. It is almost as if God is divorcing himself from these people. When he says, your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt. Who brought those people out of Egypt? Presence of God. It wasn't Moses gunslinging snakes to eat snakes and turning water into blood and separating the ocean. That was the power of God. But God's like, no, listen. Your people, whom you brought up out of Egypt, have become corrupt. I want you to understand something. When we replace the very will and presence of God in our lives, and we find our source of hope in something else, it's not just that we've abandoned God, but that our heart is corrupt. That we've allowed ourselves to be corrupted. They have been quick to turn away. Now I want you to think about this for a minute. Here's the people, and Moses is gone. The dude is up in the presence of the Lord, and everybody knows that he's in the presence of the Lord. They're aware of this, and he's receiving commands, and he's receiving all of this great stuff. And here he is saying that they're saying God is taking too long, and God is responding to Moses and saying, they have been too quick to abandon me. So here's the question when it comes to idolatry and when it comes to replacing God in our lives, where is our patience and our timeline versus that of God? When we're saying, you're taking too long, and he's screaming back at us, you're not being patient enough. If there isn't a lesson to be learned here, I don't know why we read the Bible. Because there's something very rich that we can gather from this. It's because our time and God's time are not always the same time, and that's fine. Because we just have to keep being steadfast. And here's the deal. It's not only that the people have a corruption problem. It's not that they have an idolatry problem. They have a patience and trust steadfastness problem. They're just not being steadfast to the person of God on his time. I have commanded them, and they have made themselves an idol in the shape of a calf. And when you read this passage, it's almost as if, is God angry or is he brokenhearted? Right? Is this the talk where he's burning with wrath? Probably. Or is this the talk as a parent where he says, I'm just disappointed. They've bowed down to it, so he's listing off all the commands they've just broken. They've bowed down to it, and they have said, these are your gods, O Israel, who have brought you up out of Egypt. I have seen these people, the Lord said to Moses, and they are a stiff-necked people. I'm not going to parse that Hebrew verb. There's some words rabbis don't let their Jews read until they are 21 years old. I'm not touching that one. Now leave me alone so that my anger may burn against them, that I may destroy them. Then I will make you into a great nation. But Moses sought favor of the Lord, his God. O Lord, he said, Why should your anger burn against your people? So God's turning this on Moses, and he's saying, listen, those are your people. And Moses is saying, no, God, this is your people. You know what this is? This dialogue between God and Moses? Prayer. It's Moses pursuing the presence of God and changing his mind. Why should you let your anger burn against your people whom you brought out of Egypt with great power and a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, it was with evil intent that he brought him out, to kill them in the mountains, to wipe off their face from the earth? Turn from your fierce anger. This is Moses talking to God. Man, it takes a special kind of courage to stand toe-to-toe with the Creator. And win. Turn from your fierce anger, relent, and do not bring disaster on your people. Remember what your servants, Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, to you whom you swore by your own self, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. And I will give your descendants all this land, and it will be their inheritance forever. Then the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster he had threatened. We have a God who can be both angry with what we do, but who can forgive what we do. That really cool sweater on sale for Kohl's with 30% off plus Kohl's Cash, it can't forgive you. It can't hate you. It can't love you. And it might give you a euphoric feeling of joy the first time you get to wear something new. But the warm embrace that sweater brings you is not the kind of embrace in life we need. That new car smell, it'll fade. Especially if you have 9 kids. Trust me, it'll fade. That new boyfriend, girlfriend, that new person in your life, all the wonder and all the splendor changes over time, and it's good, but it changes. Great health at some point can turn to poor. Lots of money can at some point turn to ash. And the one constant in all of our life, you shall not make any other gods before me. You know why? Because none deserve it. Because none deserve it. But how you make you feel. Our hope is in all things eternal, not temporary. And I'm not saying replace Christmas or abolish Christmas. I'm just saying remember why. And every time that we feel dark and lonely and we're frustrated because God's not operating on our precious little schedule, remember why. Hold the course. Uphold his word. Because it is better to be in the will and presence of God even when it's uncomfortable than to forsake his call and do our own thing for a moment that is temporary. Because it will just leave you broken again. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you because you truly are wonderful. And Father, we thank you because you are permanent, you are forever, you are unchanging, and you are everlasting. Father, we ask that you would give us the hope that is needed to put our trust in you. And Father, we pray that you would just continue to remind us with the awestruck wonder of what you can offer and what you can do for our lives. As your word said, we will stand in awe of God. Amen.